Good to see all of you here today. Didn't we have the most beautiful weather this past week? Yes. Starting to get a little warmer again as the days are progressing, but it is August, so we'll put up with that. I did want to mention last Sunday, the young lady, Jill Weingart, who sang with us at the end of the service. I had asked you years ago to pray for Nick Weingart, the principal at Perry, who passed away last fall of cancer. That was his daughter. I didn't want to say anything before Jalala sang or anything, so that she could maintain her composure and keep it all together and everything. But I did want to make a point to let you know that as a point of context, so you can kind of put those things together. Jalala is starting her sophomore year at the University of Findlay. She's a pharmacy major, and her mom, Kelly, has moved from the position of our elementary principal to our superintendent now. So prayers for Kelly to keep everything together as she goes through rewriting the school's position on COVID care as things go. You can see we've got Scott here who's going to sing today. We've got Dave and Jeff over here. They'll be backing them up as we do some more country type music, and it'll be fabulous. Today we'll start our service with Softly and Tenderly, Jesus is Calling, and you'll see the words up on the screen. If you're able, please stand with me.
to join us this week on Facebook Live on Tuesday at 1:30 and Thursday at 7 p.m. for our Facebook Live prayer time. And if you have any requests or praises that you would like to lift up together as a congregation, you can be on Facebook at those times. Type those into the comments and we'll make sure that those are mentioned. And so hopefully those are times that you've enjoyed in this time of kind of less community. It's been a time of community online that we can have together. And so we want to encourage you to take part in that. Also, I want to let you know about a new book study that Pastor Brian is going to be doing. It's going to start on Wednesday, September 2nd at 7 p.m. and will continue for 6 consecutive Wednesdays. And the book that they'll be doing together is How to Be an Anti-Racist. And so we've got a little bit of time here for you to do your homework and grab that book if you'd like to take part in that study. That will be via Zoom, and so if you, the link is actually in our bulletin online, and we'll continue to have that posted also on our church Facebook page and church website for you to take part in. But that book is sold anywhere where you can pick up books, via that be Amazon or I think Walmart or wherever you'd like to get it. So it's How to Be an Anti-Racist, and again that starts on September 2nd. So if you'd like to take part in that study, we would welcome you to do that. This is the time in our service usually where we would take our offering, and so of course, as you know, we are doing a COVID-friendly offering. In fact, that we have baskets at the rear of the sanctuary here. So if you do have an offering to give today that is cash or check, feel free to put that in the basket as you exit the sanctuary at the end of the service. Or if you would like to give online, we want to encourage you to do that. Of course, we have Venmo, Givelify, and Banco. Those are our 3 means to give online, so we would encourage you at this time to do that. Also, if you're watching us from the comforts of your home and you have a check that you would like to mail in, we want to let you know that that is absolutely okay. We are in the church office, and so our address is 2600 Zermley Road, Lima 45806. But this time we've got a special treat here. We've got a song to go along with our sermon series.
River Lee and Deb. Appreciate that. Believe it or not, that's my 14-year-old. That's one of his favorite songs. I like that about him. All right, we have a couple scriptures here today, and so I want to go ahead and read those for you. If you'd like to follow along, I do believe the word should be up here on the screen. Our first one is Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 16 through 26. This is what the Lord says. Restrain your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for your work will be rewarded, declares the Lord. They will return from the land of the enemy, so there is hope for your descendants, declares the Lord. Your children will return to their own land. I have surely heard Ephraim's moaning. You discipline me like an unruly calf, and I have been disciplined. Restore me, and I will return, because you are the Lord my God. After I strayed, I repented. After I came to understand, I beat my breast. I was ashamed and humiliated, because I bore the disgrace of my youth. Is not Ephraim my dear son, the child in whom I delight? Though I often speak against him, I still remember him. Therefore my heart yearns for him. I have great compassion for him, declares the Lord. Set up road signs, put up guideposts. Take note of the highway, the road that you take. Return, Virgin Israel, return to your towns. How long will you wander, unfaithfully daughter Israel? The Lord will create a new thing on earth. The woman will return to the man. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. When I bring them back from captivity, the people in the land of Judah and in its towns will once again use these words. The Lord bless you, you prosperous city, you sacred mountain. People will live together in Judah and all its towns, farmers and those who move about with their flocks. I will refresh the weary and satisfy the faint. At this I awoke and looked around. My sleep has been pleasant to me. Our next scripture is Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come home, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. who has squandered your property with prostitutes come home, you killed the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Once again, it's good to see all of you here this morning, and whether you're physically here or you're digitally here, it's good to have you with us. And I'm ringing a little bit. Can you pull me down just a skosh? Just a skosh. There we go. Has to be kind of loud so they can hear online, but not so loud that, well, it's uncomfortable for you. So here in this space. So anyhow, so we're on this series called Code of the Road, and it just came out of the desire to be able to just go places. You know, we live in a time right now where we're finding out just what a luxury and what a gift travel is. Not just the opportunity to go different places and to experience new things, but also to spend time with either spend time with the people that we love, or spend time alone, spend some time away from the pressures of life, and so that we can refresh and we can refuel. Even if you travel right now, there's always this uneasy feeling. I don't know about you, but everywhere I go, there's always this uneasy feeling that the virus is lurking somewhere, and that the virus could be on the jar of peanut butter at the grocery store, or it could be on the door handle that you have to open to go into the hardware store. And so I've never used so much hand sanitizer in my entire life, and we know it's airborne, so every time I hear a cough, my skin starts to crawl. So I don't know about you, but there's this kind of pressure that just doesn't go away right now. And so this idea of being able to escape the power of a road, to be able to take us somewhere, and to live life in a way that would be normal to us. And so, as a part of the series, so what we're doing is we're going through road scriptures. These are scriptures that take place on roads or involve roads. And the first scripture comes to us from the book of Jeremiah. And you need to understand, if you don't already, that the idea of exile and home is a powerful metaphor throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament. Because Israel had been conquered and taken into exile, and was in exile for hundreds of years before the ruling class were allowed to come home and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And Jeremiah was a prophet who tried to warn Israel about what was coming, trying to warn Israel about this season this terrible season that was about to begin. And even apart from that, a little bit further, Jeremiah read the tea leaves of what was going on around him in the world, and could see that the kings, the ruling class, those who were ruling Israel, were making some catastrophic mistakes. And he begged them to stop. And I don't just mean from the standpoint of honoring God and worshiping God in the right way, with the right heart, eliminating idols in the city of Jerusalem and idol worship and all of those kinds of things. But even to go further is to criticize the king of Israel for aligning himself with Egypt as opposed to Babylon. That if If only Israel had aligned themselves with Babylon and maybe become a vassal state as opposed to doing something similar with a weaker kingdom to the south that couldn't protect it, that she could at least avoid the fate of Jerusalem being destroyed. And so Jeremiah has been a harbinger of doom and gloom. He has, through his words and through his actions, he has made it clear that exile is coming. And by the time we get to this chapter, by the time we get to this point in the book, it has become clear that things are falling apart. Jerusalem is under siege. She is about to fall. And this prophet, who for the better part of his adult life has been trying to warn anybody who would listen that this was coming, instead of using this time as I told you so, shifts his message. Instead of pointing out all the wrongs that he could see around him and warning people that if they didn't get right with God, that there would soon be calamity, Jeremiah shifts his attention. I mean, it is inevitable now. The walls will fall. And the armies will come. And many innocents will die. And so Jeremiah, as this is happening, as people are starving while the city is under siege, and as they are waking up to the reality of what is going to come, Jeremiah begins to speak hope. He says, listen, Ephraim, works like this. When you were kind of self-absorbed and self-possessed and you weren't willing to deal with what needed to be dealt with, even as you were being punished for your own actions, God still loves you. And so this punishment will not last forever. Remember, one of the key differences in the Old Testament and the New Testament is that in the Old Testament, every action that happens in the world, good and bad, Israel believed that God was the one who had authored it. Every last thing that happened. The New Testament, we have a little different sense that there is some free will at play in the world, and that we have a choice, that we can make a choice as to whether or not we're going to be faithful or strive to be faithful and attempt to get our life on the right track, and that there's a little more randomness that happens in the world that because of the nature of the unpredictability of creation and also the impact of decisions that not only we make but have been made around us and before us, that things are a little more uncertain. But in the Old Testament, there is a sense that everything is controlled by God. And so God speaks and says, Ephraim, when you come to your senses, when you realize what you have done, you're going to find out that I loved you all along. And so Israel set up the guideposts, set up the signs, so that you know how to get back to the city, and others know how to get back to the city. That people will know how to get back home. This exile is going to last a long time. Many of you are never going to see your hometown again. You're never going to see your loved ones again. Whatever sunrise you enjoyed watching come up over the promised land in the morning, whatever land you enjoyed working, whatever routines, I don't know what routines you have in your life that bring sanity to you. I don't know if there's a coffee shop that you like to go to. Every so often, when I would drop the boys off at school, I would drive through one of the restaurants up here, give myself a cup of coffee, and in all those restaurants, there are a group of men holding court at like 7 o'clock in the morning. They're all just there with their cup of coffee or their turnover or their little breakfast sandwich, solving all the problems of the world. There's no reason for them to be there except that they just want to get out of the house, right? Be with one another. I don't know what little routines you have in your life, but that's about to end. But set up the road signs, set up the guideposts. You will not be back, but Israel will be. So it's this powerful idea that we can always come home. That God always allows us to come home. And it's an idea that Jesus uses in a variety of ways as he teaches and preaches, walking across this same landscape that Jeremiah had walked and preached across. This idea that even though Israel is still home, she's still not really restored. People still aren't really restored. The nation isn't really restored. And here's the thing. If you were a Pharisee or a Sadducee, but particularly a Pharisee, you would tell people that the reason why Israel wasn't restored were all of the people that were sinners who were making mistakes. That those things that Jeremiah talked about getting right with God, that was still in play now, only instead of Jeremiah speaking to the king in the court about cleaning up Jerusalem's act, that instead now God is speaking directly to each one of us about cleaning up our own act. And that when we clean up our own act, then God will step in and set things right. God will clean everything up. So the reason for Israel's demise is now not the king making all the wrong decisions, because there is no king of Israel. I mean, there's Herod, but he's not a real king. I mean, he's some interloper. He's someone that was easy to kind of leave on a throne, who had usefulness to Rome, but he was not from the line of David. He wasn't the Messiah that was going to make everything right that Israel had been hoping and dreaming of. Israel didn't have a king, so they couldn't point at the ruling class anymore, so they pointed at those who were sinners, particularly those who were poor, those who were sick, those who made bad choices with their life in a variety of ways, sinners of all kinds. And they even began to look at ordinary, everyday people and the minutiae of their lives, what they ate and what they wore and how they conducted themselves and who they included and who they needed to not include. And so it's the sinner, people are being told, that are keeping Israel from being able to come home fully. And Jesus tells this story. It's a story about exile. It's a story about a young son who decides that he doesn't want to play the game that his father wants him to play anymore. He doesn't want to work hard on the farm. He doesn't want to toil away. What he wants is he wants his half of the inheritance, and he wants to go do what he wants to do. And it pains the father, I'm sure, anytime a child makes a decision that makes you scratch your head, or worse, shake it. Certainly grieved the father to have the son essentially say to him, "Dad, I wish you were dead now so I could have my inheritance." But the father acquiesces. He splits up his property, cashes out the half that would be the son's, gives that to him, and the son goes and lives it up for a while, right? Lives it up. It's one of those sinners that's keeping Israel from being able to fully come home. And after a while, he runs out of money, and he doesn't have a place to live, and all the people who he thought were his friends Instagram influencer, right? Some other flavor of the moment. And he found himself working for a pig farmer. You just can't imagine if you're an Israelite. I don't know that you can fall any further than being somebody who works for a pig farmer in Israel. You're not allowed to eat bacon, not allowed to eat ham. Here you are working for a pig farmer, and the pigs eat better than you do. That's some statement Jesus is making. He's a great storyteller. Finally, the young man wakes up and says, I can eat better if I worked as a servant on my father's property. I'm going to have to swallow my pride and admit what an idiot I've been, and I'm going to have to go back. And I'm going to have to prostrate myself in front of my father. I'm going to have to lay down, face down on the ground. And I'm going to have to let my father know that I have sinned against him. And I made horrible choices and beg him to take me back. And that's exactly what he does. And the father welcomes him home. I mean, he doesn't just welcome him home as a servant, he welcomes him home as a son. And so this idea that we can always come home, as far away as we have been from God for whatever reason, this idea that we can always come back is an idea that it permeates the entire Bible. We can never be so far away from God that if we decide we want to go be close, if we decide we want to make changes in our life so that we can be in the presence of the Father again, so that we can feel that presence, we can feel that affection, that approval, that grace, that sense of mercy that never goes away. That opportunity to be in the presence of God is always with us. We can always go home. And when we go home, we're going to be accepted as a child. Whether we're talking about Ephraim or the younger son, we're always going to be welcomed back as a child, a beloved child, who even though we may have felt in our hearts that we were far away from God, and that God was far away from us, and that God didn't want us in his presence because of that which we were doing in our life, we'll find out the truth. That every day we were wandering out in the middle of Sin City, every day we were out in Vegas living it up, God was yearning for us to come home. But here's the thing. We can be, if we're in exile, we can always come back home and we'll always be welcomed with open arms. But when we come back, it will not be the same. We will not be the same, and we will not understand God in the same way that we did before we left. We'll have a different understanding of who God is and who we are. If exile means repairing some sort of brokenness that has existed in our life, whatever relationship we have, whatever, if it was to a person, or if it was to a substance, or it was to an action, or whatever it was, when we come back and we dwell in the Father's presence, then that relationship has to be, those relationships, particularly the ones that have broken us down, they all have to be redefined and re-understood. And even the nature of our own relationship with God, yes, God is the Father who welcomes us back. But even the nature of that relationship with God, the depth of God's grace and God's mercy and God's love, we need to ponder that and what that means. But at the same time, also think about how we thought of God in the meantime. While we were before we left, and while we were in exile, and after we've come home. Our own perception of who God is. The younger son has to reevaluate his father and the depth of his love for him. The depth of his love for him before he left, the depth of his love for him when he was gone, and the depth of his love for him when he returned. We're always welcome home, but if we decide we want to come home, it doesn't mean that everything is the same as it was before. It just doesn't. Because of that, that means that you and I are going to be forced to change. Israel, the other aspect of this parable, as Jesus is telling it, is Jesus is saying to the least and the last and the lost, yes, you can come home. But guess what? All of these religious authorities that are telling you that you're the reason that Israel is in the position that it's in right now, that's just not true. They're telling you that God doesn't love you because you're far away. And if you don't get everything straightened in your life, then God will not accept you. All the younger brother did was come home. That was it. All he did was come home. Humbled, embarrassed, but as far as any kind of personal work, as far as working out the entire law, you see, we need to think a little bit differently communally about what it means to restore somebody. What it means to restore somebody in the context of Christian community, what it means to restore somebody in the context of our homes and our families, what it means to be restored ourselves. This idea that you and I need to set up guideposts, we need to set up road signs. That in our lives, we can't just think about this from the standpoint of being the younger son. We also need to think about it from the standpoint of being the father and being the older son. And we don't allow our hearts to become hardened in a way that God's heart isn't hardened towards others. And so, using our life to set up guideposts and road signs so that people know, those who are out there in the world who are lost, know that if they come into our presence, they will find the same kind of grace that they will find in the Father, as best as we can approximate it. Because none of us is God, right? We all have our limits. I mean, in the course of reconciliation with other people who have hurt us or people who we have hurt, we can find reconciliation, but that doesn't mean that the relationship was the same that it was before. It's going to be different. Doesn't have to be bad, but it's going to be different. And so as a part of thinking about what it means to be on the road, this idea that you and I have a responsibility to set up these guideposts and these road signs because we have been in exile. And we have found our way home, and we want others to be able to find their way home also. And this is the way. This is the way of grace. This is the way of mercy. When I took my oldest child to college, to visit the college that has been attended over the course of the last couple of years, I did so right after formally separated from my ex-wife. And it was right around Thanksgiving, and so we drove down to West Virginia Wesleyan, which is where all my money has been going for the last couple of years. And then we were headed over to look at the University of Cincinnati, and the GPS on the phone, instead of taking us through, I thought it would take us back up to 50 and across 50 over to Cincinnati, but instead it took us down to Charleston, West Virginia, and over to Cincinnati. And I grew up in Charleston. We moved there when I was about 2 or 3. We lived there till I was about 10. So we were there 7 or 8 years. I have a lot of really great memories. And so as we were driving to Cincinnati through Charleston, it hit me. You know, I had always assumed that my wife would plan my funeral. You know, it just wasn't one of those things I had really ever thought about, really. But you start processing things in a new way when you feel like you're out in exile. And I just thought she would plan my funeral. And it occurred to me that that wasn't going to happen now. That, in all likelihood, this young person who I had raised was going to be the one that was going to plan my funeral. And I realized that he didn't know anything about my childhood. And so, as we were pulling up into Charleston, I said, "Would you like to see where I grew up?" And he said, "Sure." And we went on a little tour. Max and I went on a little tour, and we went past the house where I grew up, and the school where I went to elementary school, and the pool where I got tortured by swim team coaches, and a little church just outside of Charleston where my journey with God began. And I wept uncontrollably the entire time. I'm not ashamed to say that. I just wept uncontrollably. Because I was home, but it wasn't the same. But I could still come home. It wasn't the same, but I could still come home. Things had fallen apart in my life at the time, but God's love was still in place. God's love was still in effect, and the promises of God's love and restoration were still real. The last word had not been written yet. And so there were tears of mourning for what had been lost, but what I now know 4 years later, almost 5, what I now know 4 years later was that God's love was still ready to do something, continue to do something inside of not just me, but that young person that was sitting beside me too, and my other kids, and my soon-to-be ex-wife. It was a humbling moment. And to have been a part of that painful process over the last 4 years has been something else. But I know many of you have experienced similar things. I know that many of you have experienced the reality of your future not going the way that you thought it was going to go, and having to own up for whatever mistakes that you had made over that time. Even if you were wronged or you were the one doing the wronging, whatever it was, and this could be professionally or this could be personally, in any aspect in your life that slowly went awry. I know those stories are all over, not just this congregation, but all over this community and all over this world. And this assurance that God will never abandon us. That God will always love us. I guess that's why so many broken couples have come to see me over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. I guess that's why God uses the brokenness of people if they allow them to do so to help bring healing in the lives of others. Because if you allow God's love to work in your heart and your life and find some healing and find peace in the midst of this, then those road signs will be erected and those guideposts will be up. And you can become a conduit of God's grace and of God's mercy. If you are in exile, you can always come home. But if you are safely at home, even if at one time you were in exile, don't become the elder brother. Don't allow your heart to be hardened against those who have also wandered away. Will you bow your heads with me, please? Lord God, all of us have some country road. All of us have some country road that's calling us home. All of us have this need to belong somewhere, to feel like we have a place, to feel like we are accepted, that we have our people who love us. Lord, help us to understand that that acceptance, first and foremost, comes out of a sense of our place with you, the sense of our relationship with you. That you are not the elder brother, you are the Father. That you're not sitting in your heaven going tisk, tisk, tisk. Look at the mess you've made of your life. Your chances are all used up. Lord, we just give thanks and praise that that is not how you operate. And so, Lord, if the opportunity to come home always exists with us, teach us that what it means to set up a guidepost of people to be able to come back, to come home, to get out of exile and to be in that place of safety and security so they can begin to reorient their lives in a way that's not only pleasing to you but good for them. That, Father, that it is this growing sense of grace and mercy that begins to be born in us and exhibited in the world that becomes one of those major signs and guideposts. Use us, God. Use our experience and our brokenness to show your victory again. To not expect that things will be like they were before, that things will be different, but that doesn't mean that things have to be bad or that we have to lay in wait for whatever food the pigs are not willing to eat. That is not the person that we need to be. And that's not the people. That's not what other people have to believe that they need to be. Father, let us not just sing of your amazing grace, but embody it to the best of our ability. And we ask this all in the name of the one who taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. This concludes this service. If those that are in the back could go ahead and depart this place first. At this time, we would appreciate it. Those who are further toward the front, if you could just give them an opportunity to get up and move out, we would appreciate it. Please maintain social distancing. We appreciate your cooperation in terms of wearing masks and following all the protocol that we have set up. Stay safe, God bless, and we'll see you again real soon. Pray with Glory Tuesday, 1:30. Woo!